This is Election Talk. Election Talk with attorney Carrie Harper on Radio Free 102.3 KJLH.
Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, beautiful people. This is Carrie Harper on Election Talk. Today is Friday, October 14th. And if you're tuning in for gospel, I hope you aren't disappointed, but there is an election in 25 days. So Mr. Wonder wants to get us up to speed. So we're going to be talking to two more judicial candidates today because although they are at the bottom of the ballot, it's a very important position. So sprinkled in there, we're going to have a couple of current events, and we can't ignore the most current event happening with the city council. So there were some, if you didn't hear the news about that, City Council President Nuri Martinez made some very disparaging remarks about a black child of another council person, supposedly looking like a little monkey. And, I'm not going to repeat all the comments, but they were derogatory, and they involved a couple of other city council folks. And there was a statement that said that the DA, George Gascon, was with, quote, the blacks. So, that's curious. And actually, I hope he is with the blacks. I hope he's with the blacks. I hope he's with the Mexicans. I hope he's with our brown and Asian brothers and sisters because he's a county elected official. So we do have today DA George Gascon on the phone, in addition to his Director of Communications, Tiffany Blacknell. Good morning, Ms. Blacknell.
Good morning.
How you doing this morning?
Wonderful. Thanks for having us.
Yes, we wanted to get that statement because we wanted to have, DA George Gascon, are you there with us?
I'm here. Good morning, Carrie, and good morning, Tiffany.
How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Yourself?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for joining us on such short notice, and thanks for showing up. It's always appreciated when folks follow through with their commitment to show up and don't cancel last minute. I'm not going to belabor that issue and say anything about that. Councilman Marquise does. Anyway, so DA George Gascon, what do you feel personally about that comment that you are with the blacks? What did you feel when you heard that?
Look, I'm going to begin by saying that I'm heartbroken, right? Because we have done so much work for so many years to bring our communities together. The fact that some people think that by my supporting the African American community, somehow that means that I'm not supporting the Latino community or that I'm not supporting other communities, is offensive. I am with the blacks, but I'm also, as you say, with the Latinx community, with the Asian community, and with every community, right? The work of an elected official, especially in a place like LA, is critically important that we're with our entire community, right? We get elected by our entire community because our entire community places a level of trust in us to be the one that is going to be representing them. And, the politics of scarcity that were so prevalent in that conversation is a disservice, it's outrageous. The racist comments that were made are horrendous in so many levels. And then, sort of the political power play that went in is so beyond the pale that I don't know where to start, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I have wrestled with this for days now, and I go from being angry to being disappointed. It's a mix of emotions that I'm still haven't wrapped my head around, other than to tell you that I am more committed than ever to doing the work to make sure that, yes, that I am with the black community, but I am also with every other community, and that we have a lot of work to do, and there are many of us that are not going to let up. We've worked too hard for too long to allow this to define our community.
Yes, I agree. When you say, DA, when you say you're disappointed, Are you kind of disappointed in the fact that it seems that folks in your own race seem like they're treating you maybe like a little bit of a traitor when they say something like that?
Well, I mean, that's part of it, but I tell you, Terry, it's much deeper than that. It's about it's about that mentality of scarcity, that in order for you to get ahead, you think that somebody else has to be put down, as opposed to thinking about what we need to do is we need to link arms together, because the way that we succeed is by being together, by representing one another. We have so many fights to fight, right? We have income inequality. We have healthcare inequality. We have, God knows, a criminal legal system that is broken in 100 different ways, or arguably not broken, arguably working the way it was designed to be, which is to keep often poor people and people of color and black and brown people down. You have all these challenges, and we're going to be fighting over crumbs, because this is really, at the end of the day, what that is. And by the way, this is not. I refuse to see this as a fight for the betterment of one community. I view it as individual, personal ambitions. This is about people's own political careers. This is a very selfish conversation at the end of the day.
And you feel it's isolated to just a few council persons. You don't feel like it's something that's kind of prevalent with a group of folks against you?
Look, I mean, I think that there are some folks that are against me because I have pushed against the status quo. And any time that you push against the status quo, then you're trying to move big systems, and the criminal legal system is a big system. And when you push to move things in a different direction, there is fear of the unknown. There is attachment to what we've always have. There are economic and political power bases that are created by this. We cannot overlook the fact that the entire machinery around the criminal legal system is an economic and a political force, right?
Yeah.
People make money by having more people in jail. People make money by having more people in prison. People make money by having larger, district attorney's office and larger prisons and larger police departments, and how the economic forces that come with the size then impact the political development in a community. So it would be naive not to see that there's a huge component of this that has to do with politics and power. So the fact that I'm questioning the way that we have done business, and that I'm trying to take us into a perhaps a different way of looking at our work, is going to be, it's going to be threatening to some people that have developed their power base for us, from that system. I tell people this is no different than going after the fossil fuel industry or the tobacco industry, right? You have political forces that are created around a structure that has both an economic and a political base. And once you go after that, you will definitely get a reaction. So a lot of the reaction that I've had for the way that I've been doing the work for many years is based on that. And I get that, and I understand that to be part of the work.
Yes.
What I heard from these people is slightly different than that.
Right. Let me ask you, did these folks support you during the recall election that you just recently and successfully went through?
Interestingly enough, two of them didn't.
Which ones?
Ms. Martinez and Mr. De Leon did not support me. They were not openly against me, but I knew that there were many comments that were being made against me, often in places where people that were clearly, supporting the recall. One that surprised me, because I have known him for years and consider him a friend, was, Gil Cedillos, and it was very disappointing. to
Well,
hear him being part of that.
I don't know if you were listening yesterday when we had Miss Bobbie Jean Anderson on, but Gil Cedillo is now reaching out for friends. So it's interesting. It's an interesting turn of play. 1 minute. Yeah. I'll leave it there, and I'll bring in Miss Black now. As a Black female, how did you feel when you heard that statement?
Well, for one, I know the DA's heart. I know where he lies, and so I was at once affirming it. Yes, DA Gascon is with Black folks, but on the second piece, I didn't love the framing, as if it's a binary choice, as if he has to choose between the Blacks and the Latinx community. That to me was offensive, and I know how hard he works to bridge divides. I know how hard he works to create a very diverse team. You know, we were in the Sentinel newspaper a few months ago around him bringing in 5 Black women to the executive team. I know he has
Out of how many?
I think the team is about 10, George,
So
or 12.
Yeah, 10, 12, about
so it was
12,
actually diverse as opposed.
Yeah,
to
it's the highest. I mean, it's the largest number
Right.
of a group, right? And also, but also, he also has Latinx folks on the board. He has LGBTQ community. He has an Asian chief deputy. Like it's very intentional that on our executive team, there's a diverse voice, not just in ethnicity, not just in gender, not just in sexual orientation, but diversity of thought. And so we have these robust conversations where our lived experience is relevant because we know that the criminal legal system does impact Black and brown folks in a detrimental way. And so we're very thoughtful about that. He's very intentional. So for him to be dragged in this scandal, for me, was offensive.
And just, can you break down the stats just a tad bit when you say that? Isn't it true that the prisons are full of mostly Black and brown folks, even though the population of folks in the county are dramatically reduced? You have a lot more in the majority than you do in the minority, but in the prison systems, you have a lot more folks who are in the minority.
Of course, right? I think LA is a very diverse county, obviously. But, you know, in like the previous administration, for example, there were 23 people that were sent to death row and 22 of them were people of color, right? We know these things impact Black and brown folks far more, right? Or stops by police, for example. Black and brown folks are stopped by police disproportionately, and they're less likely to have contraband when they are stopped than white folks. So these systems impact communities of color greatly, and I'm very thankful to have a DA who appreciates that and have the first DA, to be very honest, to call it out. I've never heard an elected DA say that the criminal legal system is a vestige of slavery. I've never heard those words from another DA.
Okay, I haven't either. And, they put them through a lot for saying that. But, change is good. Sometimes growing pains is good, right?
Absolutely.
So, DA Gascon, did you have something? Did I cut you off?
No, when you were asking Tiffany, and of course we talk about this all the time, you can walk into LA County Jail any day of the week, or frankly, you can walk into any jail or prison in the state and around this country, and you can't escape the reality that while the African American population and the Latino populations may not necessarily be in the majority in many places, certainly in LA County, the Latino population is closer to the majority, but you look at the Black population, and the proportionality of the representation of people that are in the criminal legal system, whether you're talking about jails, prisons, or conditional release, right, probation and parole, the far exceeds the representation in the community, and there's no this doesn't happen by accident, and it's not because poor Black communities or Latino communities are more crime prone than they are in other communities. It has so much to do with the inequalities that impact the environment around where people have to navigate life on a day in and day out. Where often if you're talking about houselessness, you look at the representation of African Americans in the houseless population in county. You look about, when you look at our educational system and, the schools that are broken down and generally, the lack of resources in schools that primarily focus on, Black and brown communities, you start adding all these things up, and then the sort of the final outcome of that is it comes into the criminal legal system and the way that we try to deal with social and economic issues through arrest and incarceration. So the fact that these are communities that are extremely vulnerable to abuses, as Ms. Blacknell mentioned, Black and brown people are more likely to be stopped by the police and not have any contraband proportionally than when you're talking about white people. And the reason for it, by the way, is because when the police is making a stop of a white person, they generally are much more circumspect, and they are really, being careful that if they're going to make the stop, that they have sufficient probable cause to find, the contraband and the things that lead to a connection to a criminal activity. Whereas when they're stopping a Black or a brown person, it often is simply because they're in a certain part of the community, and they're driving around or they're walking around, and they're Black and brown, so they must be doing something wrong. So there's sort of this cavalier approach to the stop that by design leads to less likelihood of finding any type of evidence of a crime, which impacts the psychic of the community, and sometimes it drags people into the system in ways that would never drag in members of the white community, for instance.
Yes, and it gives folks a bad taste in their mouth when they're singled out and they're pulled over, and the first thing that's asked, are you on probation and parole?
Yeah, exactly.
And none of my white friends ever get pulled over and asked as one of the first questions, are you on probation or parole? And you and I, D.A. Gascon, we were both police officers. I never pulled over, and the first thing I ask is that. You treat folks with respect. I'm sure you never did, but Ms. Balcano, you were raising it.
Yeah, I think it must be said also that Black folks are not just desperately impacted by the criminal legal system. They're also disproportionately impacted by crime, right? Mm-hmm. They have, I believe it's 8% of the population, but 24% in the city of LA, but 24% of hate crimes. Right. Like we suffer from gun violence more than other groups. We suffer from like the DA mentioned, a litany of ills that come to the Black community. So the idea, I think DA Gascon should be with the victims of crime, right? The majority, right, disproportionate impact of crime. I think he should listen to the Black community when we're suffering at the hands of disproportionate gun violence.
Well, and I want to couch that as you're not saying should be with the Black, but it just happens that it disproportionately affects Black folks more.
Oh, absolutely. No. Not that it should, but that it does. And as an elected DA, he should stand with those folks, and he does.
Yes. And so I get you. Anything else, DA, you wanted to add?
Well, look, I mean, I think, Carrie, the bottom line is that I refuse to define our community by the comments of these three individuals or their behavior. I am very committed to continuing to serve our entire community, and I think that we collectively need to be very committed to move forward. We're much better than this. We have to do the people's business each and every day. We still have many problems. Certainly in my part of the house, when we're talking about the criminal legal system, we got a lot of work to do to reform the system, to bring more equality, to bring safety to all of our communities. By the way, the other unspoken part of this is, Tiffany was talking about that, the Black community, African Americans, are the victims of hate crimes at a higher rate than any other group, by the way. And that's the numbers that we know of. You don't know what you don't know, right? The fact that many people don't report. But even in other crimes, the African American community tends to have a higher representation in victimization and the trauma that causes. And that's one of the reasons why I am with the Black community, because it is important that I be there to protect and to try to repair the harm that is often visited upon the Black community. But that, as Tiffany mentioned earlier, it's not a binary decision. It's not because you're doing this, you're not doing the other. It's we are with the Black community, but we're with every other community, and we're going to continue to do the work. And I flat out refuse to allow our community to be defined by the comments of 3 individuals or 4 individuals.
I agree. Well said. There were a lot of groups that came out and had a lot of things to say when you survived this uh, recall in search of a reason, is how I described it. But like the Police Officers Association, who seemed to take a very political stance, and it seemed like they were jumping in to the political arena. I'm wondering, have you heard of any ads that they're going to run to call for the resignation of Kevin De Leon and Sid Cedillo and the other person? Uh, her-
uh, Kerry, I'm gonna leave that unanswered. I think that my silence hopefully speaks for itself.
okay, and let me ask you another question. I'm sure you're going to answer this one about the illegality of gerrymandering.
Unquestionably, and it's something that we're taking a look at, and I know that the Attorney General, and he should, he has already said that he would have his office take a look at it. But certainly, I'm going to make sure that that this is something that is addressed. I think that also this is going to be, I believe, an opportunity to explore legislative solutions. I don't think that the city council should be the one that defines the new districts. I think that we have moved away from having the state assembly define their own districts. We have now a citizens commission. I think that this is going to open up the conversation, and I think it's going to remove all doubts for the need to ensure that redistricting in the city of LA is done in a fair and impartial way. And obviously, you cannot trust sometimes the people that are in the system to be the ones that have the final decision. We see gerrymandering happening all over the country on a regular basis, and we should be better than that. So I'm hoping that this very troubling and horrendous incident will lead to legislative solutions in terms of how council districts are redistricted every 10 years. I think also it opens up the question for the city of LA, to create a mechanism to when you have perhaps members of the council that have committed acts that, while they may not be involved in a criminal prosecution at the moment, that there's a way to deal with grossly unethical behavior, as in the case here. So I think that this is going to open up opportunities for reform within our political system in the city of LA, and I look forward to seeing those conversations both at the state and the local level.
Right. And just to explain to some of the listeners who may not know what gerrymandering is, that's the way that you draw the map to show who's going to be in which district for voting purposes for the folks you vote for, right? And
Right. That's correct.
and it's done all over the country, and it's legal when it's done in a bipartisan way, when you're doing it fairly, involving Democrats, Republicans, or whatever. But when you're doing it to exclude a certain group of, say, black folks, which it seems like the tape alluded to, it was being drawn in a way to exclude black folks. That's illegal, right? Or you said you didn't want to answer that.
No, that part of it I did. I mean, I'm saying it's absolutely legal. I didn't want to answer what certain organizations are going to do or won't do as a result of this. But this is actually for people to understand this more deeply. Look, this is a way that the Jim Crow laws were created in the South to disenfranchise black folks after the Civil War, to ensure that even though slavery was no longer legal, that you could still keep large segments of the black population from being able to have representation at local government or congressional districts. So in essence, what we're talking about is you design districts in order to make sure that you dilute the voting bloc of a particular group. In this case, it was the African American community. and it's clearly is undemocratic, is unethical. I mean, it's on and on and on, right?
Yes. Well, DA, we appreciate you calling in this morning. And Ms. Blacknell, anything you have to say in closing?
Oh, just that even though this was a very sad chapter in LA history, I'm still optimistic. The young folks who showed up at the city council, who are demanding action, who are not taking no for an answer, who are the energy of the next generation, I'm inspired by. As a mom, as a mother of Black children, my heart was broken for Mike Bonin's son. But I left. We'll leave this chapter with optimism. We have people like George Gascon who have a history of building bridges. We have young folks like Isaac Bryan and Eunices who will lead the charge to bring unity to both communities. And I think LA has a promising future despite this dark chapter.
Yes, well said. Thanks so much. So we're going to take a break here on KJLH 102.3 FM. And when we come back, we're going to talk to two judicial candidates. We're going to talk to Ji Young Carolyn Park and to Elizabeth Lashley Haynes.
Thanks
Hey, it's Steve Harvey, y'all. Here's what happened on the Steve Harvey Morning Show. He say he feels good when he gets feedback.
You're listening to Election Talk with attorney Kerry Harper on Radio Free 102.3 KJLH.
Good morning, beautiful people. And we are jumping right into the judicial candidates, and we're offering equal time to the judicial candidates. Today, we have in studio another defender of justice, Elizabeth Lashley Haynes. Miss Lashley Haynes has been a public defender for 20 years and has been throwing down for folks who cannot afford attorneys. And she's in studio, and I'm just going to let her take the mic. Miss Haynes, why are you running for judge?
Oh, hi, Carrie. Thanks so much for having me here today, first of all, and thanks so much to KJLH. That's a great question that I've been asking myself for the last 9 months while I've been campaigning. And really what it comes down to, it sounds cliche, but when you've been working in the system for 2 decades, you see really the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I got to a place where I didn't just want to complain about it, but I wanted to be the change that I want to see in the legal system. And as cliche as that is, that's really my truth, is I saw the dysfunction. I saw the revolving door to prison and the pipeline that was going on. And I want to be something better than that. I want to bring a new kind of justice to LA County. And that's really what it comes down to.
I understand. And you're not just saying this now when you decided to run for judge. This isn't something that you're thinking of recently, because your first job was what? Human rights? Your very first job ever was in human rights?
Well, I would say my first legal job. Yeah, my first legal job. I worked at Human Rights Watch based out of New York City. I was in that division, and I worked as a legal intern, specifically in the Sub-Saharan Africa division, where we looked at legal violations and everything that was going on in that region of the world. Of course, I was just a small intern, part of a much bigger, broader, wonderful nonprofit, the Human Rights Watch.
Okay. And, there's lots of information out on the judicial candidates, and we're here to provide you with that. And one of the sources all of you voters can go to is the Voter's Edge. And you could see what some of the judicial candidates say about themselves. So you talked a little bit about Measure J.
Correct.
In your bio. You have anything you want to add on that? There was some very interesting stuff there.
Yeah, I think what's wonderful about Measure J and how it relates to me running is the people of LA County wanted to vote for alternatives to incarceration and wanted to vote in that we spend our tax dollars on things that are more care focused than incarceration. And we want to support mental health. We want to support addiction treatment. We want alternatives that will decarcerate and will support people. And that's what I believe in. And that's based on my experience. That's based on what I have seen. And I know firsthand that the revolving door of county jail, I mean, most people, as I think you know, Carrie, don't spend a long time in prison. Most people spend short terms in county jail, short terms in prison, and then they cycle right back in and out because we're not solving the long-term issues that are bringing people within the legal system. So I've seen it firsthand. The voters have voted it in. But now I think it's time for the voters to start looking at the judicial candidates because they, at the end of the day, are the gatekeepers.
Exactly.
So we can pass Measure J. We can say this is where we want our tax dollars to go. But if the judges are not on board with the changing laws and are not keeping up and are still back decades and decades ago and wanting to implement those laws, then we will have a problem. And this issue with our legal system, you know, us being the largest incarcerating county in the country, if not the world, that's going to continue unless we change what the bench looks like.
Right. And it's interesting, don't you think, that the judges are at the very bottom of the ballot and, you know, it's a very long ballot and folks, it just weans off. It starts with a lot of voters up top and then very few folks voting for the judges.
Yes.
So you're a public defender running against a deputy district attorney.
That's correct.
And there's never been a public defender that has been elected to judge in L.A.
That's
correct?
right. And I think it's really important, Carrie, that I talk about what I've been doing for the last 18 months to 2 years within the public defender's office. And it was really interesting. I listened to the last conversation that you were having, and I am so intimately familiar with the stats and the figures you guys were talking about because I currently am assigned, I'm one of 2 attorneys in the Racial Justice Act unit. This was a law that went into effect January 1 of 2021, where I bring claims of racial bias and prejudice that has affected someone's trial, or I bring claims of racially disparate prosecution and sentencing within LA County. So I crunch those numbers. I gather that data from the Department of Justice, from the DA's own office, and I bring claims. The last claim that I brought was a certain charge where 86% of the people arrested for this charge were African-American men versus 8% of the city's population. So the disparate racial treatment of Black and Latino folks in LA County within the legal system is at the heart of what I have been doing for the last 1 to 2 years. And it really was one of the things that inspired me to run.
Yeah, and that's something that we should note. But although that's a fact that no public defender has been elected, you actually won your primary against the deputy DA you ran against. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right. I did. I was very proud. Thank you. I was proud to come in first. And, you know, I clearly am the underdog being a public defender. And so I think it speaks to the power of what LA County wants and that LA County is interested in change and is interested in bringing diverse, different perspectives to the legal bench. I think it really speaks to that.
It does. It does. Thanks so much for saying that. Now, talking a little bit about your background, your educational background, just a tidbit about your educational background for the voters.
Oh, sure. In undergrad, I went to Syracuse University. I majored a dual major in sociology and African American studies. I studied in Southern Africa, colonialism, oppression, and emancipation. And then I went to law school at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. I finished up my 3rd year in New York City at CUNY, City University of New York in Queens, when my husband and I were living there in New York. And then ever since, I've been in LA for the past 20 years.
Majoring in African American studies.
That's right.
You probably know more about African American studies than I do.
I wouldn't say that, Carrie.
I mean, not the literal, not being Black, but you know, the other. Anyway, but so now, what makes you want to do? It seems like you've had such an impact at the public defender's office. What makes you want to be on the bench right now, since you're so impactful at the PD's office?
Yeah, and let me make it clear, I do really enjoy what I do. It's been an amazing career, but I think seeing what I see every day in court, I felt the call to move into a different direction. And when I was bringing Racial Justice Act claims and I'm hearing the response from certain judges, I really saw that we have a system of bench officers, many of whom don't even understand what implicit bias is, don't even understand what structural and institutional racism is. And I felt called to run and be somebody who understands these systematic issues and could serve the people of LA County in a more fair and equitable manner.
Okay. And to mention your seat once again.
I am running for seat number 67.
Seat number 67.
Yeah, and if I could just point out, Carrie, if I had just a quick second, I think who supports you, it really does matter. And I'd like to point out, I am the LA County Democratic Party's endorsed candidate. I'm also endorsed by such amazing public figures we've seen recently, like Assemblymember Isaac Bryan, incoming City Council member Ulysses Hernandez, and City Council member Mike Bonin. And my opponent is endorsed by people like Nuri Martinez and Gil Cedillo. So I think it really does matter who the company we keep.
And yes, that was a very noteworthy mention that Miss Nuri Martinez is endorsing your opponent.
She scrubbed her website, but I have the receipts. So.
Oh, all right then. So I think we're going to put a period on that. Judicial candidate Elizabeth Lashley Haynes for seat 67. It is a county-wide election, so every city can vote for the judges. Please do not stop at the middle of the ballot. Go to the end. Go all the way to the end and vote for the judges. And, it's up to you for who you vote for, but just please vote for the judges because rights are being taken away and things are being changed every day by folks you don't know. So we're going to end it there. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I really appreciate being here.
Oh, you're very welcome. And next up, immediately up, is Miss Jiyoung Carolyn Park, and she is running for seat 118. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
And this is someone, my understanding is that you are a civil rights attorney.
Yes, I'm currently on a legal team representing people who are suing the Sheriff's Department for excessive force used during the 2020 protests.
Oh, wow. The uprising, and you can explain a little bit more of that if you like.
Sure. So I think we all remember the protests in 2020, and frankly, I was at some of those protests and saw myself the excessive force being used against protesters. So
wow.
There were rubber bullets, tear gas, and other less lethal weapons being used at protesters who were protesting peacefully, and that's what the class action lawsuit is about. It's in federal court and still pending.
And Ms. Park, has anyone in your position ever won for judge in a judicial election?
Meaning the type of work that I do?
Yes, a civil rights attorney.
Not that I know of. It is extremely hard for a private attorney to win in these judge races because people in the past who actually vote in these judicial races tend to want to have the most hard-on crime prosecutors. So it's usually
I wonder why.
So it's usually prosecutors running against prosecutors, or it's maybe a private attorney or a public defender once in a while, but they usually lose against a prosecutor. 80% of the judges who have won in the elections in LA County have been prosecutors, and in the last election cycle, all of the judge races were won by prosecutors.
Yes, I painfully know that.
How do you know that, Carrie?
I'm not telling you. Oh my, like getting your gums scraped at the dentist without Novocaine or nitrous oxide. Anyway, that running in an election. Yeah, I do that, and I know personally, it's a very difficult thing to run when you're an active attorney. So you're going to probably race from here like Miss Lashley Haynes and run the court and then keep campaigning and doing this. But so why do you want to do this when it seems like you're doing God's work in the civil rights arena?
Because I am seeing the need for decision makers in LA County to have the mindset that I and the rest of the defenders of justice judicial candidates have. And that is a mindset that people are capable of rehabilitation and redemption, and that people need a fair shot in general in society. And right now, not everyone gets a fair shot. And there are people who are decision makers who don't even really understand that not everyone has a fair shot. And are making decisions without understanding that.
Because maybe they've come from, I don't want to say more privilege. There are some folks who come from privilege who recognize the struggle, but really you need folks who come from the struggle to be in the room. There needs to be diversity in the room to make sure there's accountability. I know I don't want to ask you about the current city council problem, but had there been some adult in the room, a diverse person of diversity in the room, someone with a little bit, with some character, and that in that scandal from the phone call with Miss Nuri Martinez, somebody would have said something. Hey, that's it. We need somebody there to speak up and say, you know what? Don't say that in front of me. That's not right.
So that illustrates the need for not just diversity. We do absolutely need diversity in terms of not only women, because only 38% of the trial judges in LA County are women.
Really?
Yeah. And, there are not enough judges in the trial courts in LA County in every racial group. That's in a minority group. Well, actually, people of color are not the minority in LA County. We're actually the majority. But
not you and I, but not
people of color in general
right.
are the majority. But that's not it. That even having people of color and BIPOC folks is not enough. That's what this illustrates. The city council situation illustrates. We need people who have the mindset that equity is not a zero-sum game, and that our futures, our well-being, our success as a society is bound up in each other's communities.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what's missing from our decision makers.
Yes. And getting attorneys from a cookie cutter prosecutor mold is not the right plan, in your opinion, right?
Absolutely. So there are studies that show that prosecutors tend to over-sentence. There are studies and data showing that a judge with a prosecutor background is 56% less likely to decide in favor of a worker in an employment claim than a judge who's a non-prosecutor. So prosecutorial bias is documented, is real, and we need some balance in the courts. We need some judges who are of our communities, who work with our communities, who have represented our communities.
And who don't just do criminal law.
Absolutely, because this is something that a lot of folks don't know, is that there are 8 different kinds of courts in the LA Superior Court system. There's family court, there's small claims traffic, mental health, appellate courts, juvenile, so many different kinds of courts. And having judges who are more in tune with our communities is so important. So, for example, African Americans make up about 20-something% of foster children, even though African Americans make up 10% of the population in LA County. And we need people in family court who are going to make fair decisions about custody, who want to keep families together as much as possible.
And you have done family court work,
I have done a little bit of family court work
and you've done employment discrimination work,
in the union setting. Yes,
and you've done disability type work.
I was an extern at the Disability Mediation Center at Loyola Law School, where I went to law school.
And you have done civil rights work.
Correct.
It seems like you are uniquely and greatly qualified to be a judge. Yes?
Well, thank you. I think so.
Okay. Well, and we're going to give your opponent equal time to come in and speak. And you're running for seat 118, and it's a county-wide election. The election day is November 8th, folks, but there's only 25 days. And the last day to register, I'm going to add that because I didn't mention it earlier, the last day to register is October 24th. You can go online, or you can call the hotline and get more information. If you want to call the hotline, I'll give you that number is 1-800-345-8686. And you can go to the website at sos.ca.gov. sos.ca.gov. Again, last day to register is October 24th. If you're unsure about your status to vote, if you might have had a little felony situation or something, listen, try and do the provisional ballot, because that's it can be debated later. Vote now, debate it later. In closing, Ms. Park, how can folks read or learn more about you? What's your website and information?
My website is parkforjudge2022.com, but my information can also be found on my Slate website, which is thedefendersofjustice2022.com.
Yes, and you are part of a four-man crew, the Defenders of Justice. Elizabeth Lashley Haynes,
Holly Hancock, and Anna Slotky-Raytano.
Thanks so much, and I'm getting the signal to wrap up. Taste of Soul is tomorrow, so I hope everybody comes out. I know the judicial candidates will be out in force. Thanks so much for tuning in to Election Talk. I'm Carrie Harper. We'll see you again on Monday.